Welcome back for a review of One Piece chapter 1017, and I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but this was another excellent chapter, and though the opening scene plays out in a very expected manner, there are still some pretty cool revelations, particularly in the cliffhanger which concludes this chapter. Before getting started, welcome if you're new to the channel. I do weekly One Piece chapter reviews, theory videos, and discussions. So if you're interested, please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon to be notified when future videos are posted. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate it. So now getting into the discussion, we pick up in the performance hall with Tama preparing to at last issue her command to the Smile users under the sway of her Kibidango. From the moment Tama took control of Speed all the way back in the first act of Wano, it was clear this moment was coming, but it doesn't make it any less satisfying to finally see Kaido's own army turning against him thanks to Tama, who in a way represents the complete inversion of Kaido's ideals and values. Kaido has spent years amassing an army of Smile users for the sole purpose of starting a global war such that he can finally achieve the Great Warrior's death, which he believes will complete his life. Kaido and his crew emphasize pursuit of strength above all else, so to have years of his efforts thwarted by a relatively powerless 8-year-old child is certainly poetic justice. Tama is a great character, and the bravery she displays at such a young age is certainly admirable. That said, we do see her pass out in fear as she looks down on the battle in the performance hall and sees Queen. Just to clarify, I do believe here fear is the reason Tama passes out rather than Queen's haki. Of course, she's encouraged by Nami and Usopp to stand back up and fulfill the purpose for which she came to Onigashima. In the build-up to Tama's orders, we see Franky and Jinbe are being overwhelmed by the sheer number of the Beast Pirates. Although they were set up for one-on-one fights against Sasaki and Huzu respectively, their opponents are not fighting fair. This is an interesting and fairly unique situation in One Piece, given that typically these Straw Hats and whatever primary enemy commanders they face are the only prominent players on the battlefield. A good example would be the battle on Fishman Island, where despite boasting an army of 100,000, the underlings of Hody Jones and the new Fishman pirates have negligible impact. Here we see the true power of Kaido's army. Despite their strange appearance, the Smile Fruit make the Gifters a force to be reckoned with, which proves just how vital Tama will ultimately be to the liberation of Wano. Much like Jinbe and Franky, we see Inuarashi being overwhelmed by a large number of opponents as he's fighting Jack. He still appears to be in decent shape, though given the way things were left with Kiku and Kinemon, I suspect this battle won't end well for him. However, Oda doesn't really place much emphasis on Inuarashi's battle with Jack in this week's chapter. We then return to the performance hall where Tama at last gives the order for the Gifters to turn on Kaido and his officers and to instead fight on behalf of the samurai to help liberate Wano. The scene then takes a chaotic turn as the Gifters begin attacking other members of the Beast Pirates in response to Tama's orders. What's so powerful about Tama's ability here is that it doesn't seem to have the same restrictions as other similar Devil Fruit abilities belonging to Sugar and Gecko Moria, who lost control of those under the influence of their Devil Fruit abilities when they lost consciousness. Speed has been under Tama's sway for weeks now in universe, which indicates the Smile army will remain loyal to their little overlord no matter what happens to her, which means any attempt by the Beast Pirates to take out Tama in order to reclaim the Gifters would be fruitless, though given Queen's attack, they are likely unaware of this fact. Before Tama, Nami, and Usopp can celebrate, Queen identifies Tama as the cause of the Gifters' betrayal and begins preparing to fire a laser in her direction when Sanji again comes to the rescue. In turn, Queen then makes reference to Sanji being the son of Vinsmoke Judge, a name which Sanji no longer wants to be associated with. Interestingly, he asks Queen if he was part of Judge's terrible research team, which Queen seemingly confirms and identifies as a group called MADS. I think this lends more credence to the idea I mentioned in last week's chapter review that Queen, as a former associate of Vegapunk and Judge, helped establish the artificial Devil Fruit pipeline alongside Caesar and Doflamingo. This is a big enough topic for a separate video, but it seems there are a growing number of ties between Vegapunk, the SSG, and the current battle on Wano. Judge, Caesar, and Queen have all worked with Vegapunk in some capacity. Throughout this story's saga, beginning from Punk Hazard, we have seen a growing narrative focus on Devil Fruit and the role they play in the One Piece world, which again we'll talk about more when we get to the final scene of this week's chapter, but I think it all leads back to Dr. Vegapunk, and as such, I do believe these Straw Hats will voyage to his island following the conclusion of the battle on Wano. The fact that Queen is both a former associate of Sanji's father and quite possibly played an integral role in developing the artificial devil fruit production pipeline is intriguing. Of course, it makes sense given Vegapunk seems to be primarily focused on researching devil fruit. Vegapunk himself has advanced far beyond the other members of this group, as Oda stated in Volume 99's SBS. Yet this leads me to believe the eugenics experiments carried out by Vinsmoke Judge may have misappropriated Vegapunk's research, much like Caesar and Queen. Judge inhumanely carried out these experiments on his own children, including Sanji. We know Kaido's bloodline elements, or genetic material, was used to create Momo's artificial devil fruit by Dr. Vegapunk, and that similarly, Judge manipulated the bloodline elements of his children to induce superpowers. Worth noting, the swirl eyebrow pattern boasted by Sanji and his siblings very closely resembles the distinctive pattern on devil fruit, which leads me to believe Judge's experiments on the Vinsmoke children, including Sanji, may have utilized bloodline elements extracted from devil fruit. Of course we know Sanji can swim, so if this is the case, he and his siblings have not inherited the curse imparted to real devil fruit users. I'm not really suggesting they have devil fruit powers per se, only that the experiments Judge conducted on them utilized bloodline elements extracted from devil fruit. However, Sanji is not the only Straw Hat who may have ties to Vegapunk and the SSG. It's interesting to note the visual similarity between Queen's robotic prosthetics and those of the Straw Hat's own super cyborg Franky. Of course, Franky modified himself on Vegapunk's home island, using Dr. Vegapunk's research during the 2-year time skip. Yet I wonder if this connection runs even deeper. This week, Queen identified the research group led by Vegapunk and Judge as MADS. Given the nature of Germa 66 and Queen's self-modification, I'm guessing this group was focused in part on development of super soldiers, which we saw ultimately come to fruition in the Pacifista based on former warlord Bartholomew Kuma. Franky was a prolific shipwright and weaponsmith from a young age, yet I have always felt like there were remaining questions regarding the process by which he initially turned himself into a cyborg. To me, it always seemed like Franky did not necessarily possess the skill set such a task would require. As such, I decided to take another look at chapter 358. Franky is of course left adrift and near death after being hit by the sea train as he makes a last-ditch effort to rescue Tom. He then happens upon a ship left adrift in the ocean, upon which he finds the material to transform into the super cyborg form we all know and love. But there are two notable things about this scene. First, Oda spends no time at all showing the process by which Franky actually operates on himself aboard this abandoned ship. Second, the design of the ship itself, which doesn't look like any ordinary ghost ship. After Queen name-dropped MADS, I was curious to see if there were any potential hints toward this group in chapter 358, and while there is no direct indication for this case, I do think it's a reasonable hypothesis the ship Franky happened upon was a MADS ship. From what we know at this point, MADS was an illegal research group led by Dr. Vegapunk. Though Vegapunk himself now works for the world government as part of the SSG, at some point in the past, the world government had grown fearful of MADS. This means there could have once been a conflict between these two groups before Vegapunk was arrested and began his tenure working for the SSG. Given the state of disrepair of the ship Franky happened upon, I wonder if it was a remnant of the clash between MADS and the Marines, which ultimately resulted in Vegapunk's current position working for the world government. The ship seemingly has metal plating, and in the few panels we see of Franky first stepping on board, there appears to be some sort of advanced instrumentation and facilities with armor plating resembling structures found on Punk Hazard. These are certainly unique features which would seem out of place on an ordinary marine or pirate vessel. I will elaborate further on these ideas in a dedicated video, but thus far there are 3 full cyborgs within the world of One Piece, and both Kuma and Queen were built from Vegapunk and MADS technology. Franky made some major revisions during the time skip using Vegapunk's technology, and so it would be interesting if his original cyborg modifications were made using MADS technology aboard their abandoned ship. Returning to the scene on Onigashima, Sanji entrusted Chopper with taking care of Zoro's injuries a few chapters earlier, and we here see the ramifications of Caesar's modification to the Rumble Ball formula. Given the foreboding nature of the foreshadowing, I was pretty surprised Oda played this for a gag with Chopper's baby geezer transformation. I was initially thinking he'd be incapacitated somehow, perhaps even while stuck in Monster Point. It seems here he has instead been reduced in stature and adopted the mannerisms of an old man. I'll be interested to see if this is just a one-time gag, or if Chopper will be stuck in this form for quite some time. Perhaps these Straw Hats will have themselves a Baby Groot situation, with Chopper remaining in this diminutive form until Vegapunk himself can provide some assistance. Of course, this is really just speculative at this point, and as such, it's far more likely Chopper will be restored before the arc is over. In any case, it appears Zoro will be back up and fighting in the not-so-distant future. Given the severity of Zoro's injuries, I suspected that breaking the mold, Zoro might be left out of commission for the duration of the battle, but I'm happy to be wrong about that fact. I enjoyed the bandaged Zoro gag, but I'm glad he'll be given more to do on Onigashima before all is said and done. Miyagi says the Minks have a treatment which will rapidly heal Zoro, but double the pain and fatigue he will later experience. This seems like yet another nod to Thriller Bark, where Zoro willingly absorbed all of Luffy's pain following the battle with Moria and Oars. Zoro, of course, accepts, and so I wonder which fight he'll be joining. The smart money is on Zoro fighting King as Sanji fights Queen, which I honestly would not have predicted at the start of this story arc. I still suspect Luffy will not defeat Kaido directly in a one-on-one fight, necessitating some type of assistance or alternative strategy, and as such, didn't really think Zoro and Sanji would fight the top commanders solo. Marco is still fighting King, so there's a chance Zoro will have a partner, and given Drake's presence in the performance hall, perhaps Sanji will also get assistance fighting Queen. While it's not certain, at this point it's undeniable there's a strong chance Zoro and Sanji will in fact fight King and Queen one-on-one, which would put them on the level of some of the top combatants in the New World. Before moving on, one last point here, I wonder if this Mink medicine could be used to get Carrot and Wanda back in the fight. We haven't seen Carrot since chapter 1006, which makes me wonder how Oda is planning to utilize her in the duration of the raid. Moving on, we at last arrive at the final scene in this week's chapter, where Jinbe is now free to fight Huzu alone thanks to Otama. Forced to finally get serious, Huzu reveals several Rokushiki techniques, the distinctive fighting style belonging to Cipher Pol and other government agents, and I was not surprised at all. If you recall from my chapter 1003 and 1005 reviews, I said I believe Huzu is working for CP0, and that seems very much to be the case here. Of course, we get some backstory in this week's chapter, as it is revealed Huzu is a former member of CP9 who rivaled the strength of Rob Lucci, but was imprisoned 12 years ago for making a serious blunder. We'll get to that latter point in a few minutes, but I first want to discuss Huzu's present allegiance. As I discussed in the chapter 1003 and 1005 reviews, CP0 were receiving intel on the status of the battle through the shamisen player wearing the distinctive paper eye mask which belonged to the Marys. Huzu appears to be the head of the intelligence division of Kaido's crew, and as such has been directly feeding intel to these world government agents. CP0 were invited to the fire festival by Orochi, and as such it seemed unlikely Kaido was aware of their presence. Kaido would have no reason to openly associate with agents of the world government while announcing his plan to turn Wano into a pirate's paradise, pursue the ancient weapons in One Piece, and start a global war. This would mean Huzu is directly feeding intelligence to the world government right under Kaido's nose. Even more interesting, he ratted out Drake and blew his cover as a member of the Marine Intelligence Division SWORD, despite the fact that the two should be on the same side, indicating a potential internal rivalry between SWORD and Aegis Zero, aka SHIELD.
Welcome to level 7.
Huzu says he's happy with what he is now, which leads me to believe, much like Lucci and the other members of CP9 who were taken back into the fold after their failing on Enies Lobby, Huzu has earned himself a role as an agent of SHIELD by feeding intel about Kaido to the world government.
Sorry, that corner was really dark and I couldn't help myself. I think there's a bulb out.
The idea of a former CP9 member is fascinating, particularly one similar in strength and ideology to Rob Lucci. I did actually notice the cat connection earlier, but it was really cool to see his hybrid form so closely resemble Lucci's. I also really like the matchup between Huzu and Jinbe, as the Six Powers and Fishman Karate are two of the most distinctive martial arts styles in One Piece. To see Huzu and Jinbe, practitioners of these two styles, face off could make for a great fight. Now we lastly come to the major revelation at the end of this week's chapter. The reason for Huzu's fall from grace was his failure to protect a government ship carrying Luffy's Gomu Devil Fruit, and so of course this revelation has a ton of potential implications and will fuel lots of theories and speculation. As such, it's too much to entirely unpack within this particular chapter review. However, I think the time has finally arrived to make a video exploring the nature and origin of Devil Fruit, which I believe could be revealed in the not too distant future if the crew next voyage to Vegapunk's location, as I suspect. However, there are a few things I want to point out here. First, in the first chapter of the series, Lucky Roo says the Gomu fruit was stolen from an enemy ship. Assuming Shanks' crew were the ones who stole the fruit directly from the world government, this would seemingly confirm Shanks does consider the world government to be his enemy, despite his appearance in the council chamber of the Five Elders during the Reverie. I already posted an earlier video explaining the role I believe Shanks is meant to play in the narrative, so it comes as no surprise to me that Shanks is not secretly loyal to the world government, but I think this chapter offers compelling evidence for those who need convincing that Shanks is not secretly evil. Second, we know certain devil fruit like Kaido's mythical fish zone and Law's Op fruit are sought after because of the unique abilities they confer to their wielder. As such, it's a natural assumption based on the fact that the world government valued the Gomu fruit that Luffy's ability is somehow narratively significant. This may very well be the case, but I think it's worth mentioning it's no surprise the Gomu fruit or any other devil fruit would be in the possession of the world government. As such, this fruit being on a government ship does not necessarily imply that this ability must somehow be special. This is again something I'll talk about more in a dedicated video, but the world government appear to be uniquely tapped into the source of devil fruit. In fact, they appear to control the source of devil fruit. Even Jabra, Khalifa, and Kaku, members of CP9, are surprised when Spandam is able to procure 2 devil fruit. The fact is, devil fruit are not commonly seen in the wild in the world of One Piece. Spandam, head of CP9, one of the elite intelligence divisions of the world government, says he needed to rely on his connection to acquire devil fruit, which implies they are controlled and distributed by a source even higher in the chain of command. From the very beginning of the series, Oda has been incredibly deliberate with the way that he uses devil fruit. In fact, there are only 5 devil fruit users in the first 100 chapters of the series, assuming Dragon is a devil fruit user, which only proves that Oda has been very careful from the very beginning of the series with who possesses devil fruit abilities, how they acquired them, and who controls their source. What this means is that Luffy's ability could very well be special in some capacity. However, it's not necessarily implied by the simple fact that it was found aboard a government ship. I would say the emphasis placed on that revelation in this week's chapter is what implies the significance of Luffy's devil fruit far more than the fact it was found aboard a government ship. I've seen some people express concern that the Gomu fruit being special makes Luffy even more of a chosen one archetype, to which I say the ship on that has already sailed a long time ago. The first chapter concludes with a narration box describing the story of One Piece as Luffy's Voyage of Destiny. The guiding hand of fate has been at work throughout Luffy's life and has served as one of the primary thematic motifs of the entire series. Luffy's hat originally belonged to the former Pirate King Gold Roger, and the two share the same dream. Luffy possesses Conqueror's Haki and hears the voice of all things. At this point, nearly everything about Luffy and his crew is special in some way, and there are multiple prophecies which foretell the role they are ultimately meant to fulfill in the world of One Piece. Oda's writing style is not particularly subversive, as Luffy's voyage patterns well to the mythic structure of the hero's journey outlined by Joseph Campbell in The Hero with 1,000 Faces. I only say this because any resistance to the idea Luffy is a prophesied chosen one type of hero, in the same vein as others like Luke Skywalker and Harry Potter, is seemingly futile at this point in the story. I think it's worth noting this is the story Oda has always intended to tell, based on the consistency of these motifs from the very outset of Luffy's adventure. One thing I will mention, however, is the fact that Devil Fruit may be valued for a number of reasons. The Jackal and Hawk Devil Fruit are regarded as valuable in Alabasta because of the animals into which their possessors transform, which correlate to the revered guardian deities of Alabasta. I think the question of how Devil Fruit came to be may be relevant to this discussion. Perhaps Luffy's Devil Fruit is revered because of how it was made and who or what it was originally made from and for. However, as I said earlier, these are questions which are too big for this individual chapter review and must be explored in a dedicated video on another day. So one last point I want to mention before closing this chapter review is that as Tama is giving her order, we see Momo and Shinobu safely on the ground after their fall from Onigashima. It appears they're standing on some type of wood surface, and so it's not clear if Onigashima is over land or still near the coastline. It's possible they have arrived on the mainland, or they could be standing on the deck of a ship if they happen to cross paths with another party presently making their way to Wano. So that's all for this week's chapter review. Again, I apologize for it being delayed. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to be notified when future videos are posted, please consider subscribing and hit the bell icon. It really helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate it. And as I said at the start of the video, my schedule should improve starting with the Chapter 1018 review. I hope to have them out on Sundays. Most important, let me know your thoughts about this chapter down in the comments.